Hello, beloved. It's me, James, and it's time this week for some sacred reading together. Today we're looking at the book of Ruth, chapter 2, verses 17 through 19. Now, if you're new to this sacred reading thing, just to summarize a little bit about what sacred reading is, we take a passage from a sacred text and we read that usually in very short snippets, and we anticipate that we will hear Spirit speak into our lives. An image will arise for us, a word or a phrase from the text itself. Now, this is different than deep Bible study, where you try to figure out what the intent of the original writer was and what the timing of the writing was, and maybe even what the words might have meant in the original language. It's a good study. It's different than sacred reading. Sacred reading is listening to the words as they are translated in this particular version that you're looking at, and you listen for echoes of Spirit in your life. Maybe you need a word of encouragement. You didn't even realize it, but there it is. Or perhaps you need a reminder of what's important in life, and there it is. Could be any number of things, an image that rises for you that helps you know more about who you are or who God is or something along those lines. That's what we do in sacred reading. Now, when you do it on your own, I encourage you to read the text out loud 3 times. And the reason I do that is because sometimes what goes directly into our brain through just reading with our eyes, we might miss some of the hints or details. Maybe the sounds of the words and the way they're shaped may give us some sense of direction about what Spirit is speaking. So we read it aloud. That way we get the whole body vibration, the engagement of your lungs and your vocal cords and your hearing. All of those things get engaged when we do sacred reading. So I only read it aloud once when we do sacred reading together on Thursdays, and that's just a matter of time. You're always welcome to, after you've listened, go off and read it by yourself 3 times, 6 times, however many times you'd like to read it aloud, but I encourage about 3. Just to bring you up to date about the book of Ruth, just so you know a little bit of the story, because this text we're reading together is story. It's presented as story to us. Naomi and her husband Elimelech have 2 sons. They live in or about Bethlehem in Israel, and there is a famine. The 4 of them move to Moab, where there's not a famine, so that they can take care of each other and feed each other. While they're there, the 2 sons get married to 2 Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. And also, while they're in Moab, Elimelech, Naomi's husband, dies, as do her 2 sons. So it is Naomi, Orpah, and Ruth left. In that time, women didn't have access to supporting themselves. They needed to be connected to a male. I know that may be uncomfortable if you're listening to this because we're talking in the 21st century, etc., but just the background of the time. And so each one of them would have either needed to be connected to a husband, a father, a brother, an uncle, someone in the family, someone who would look after them and make sure they, had access to the means of life. So Naomi decides she's going to go back to Bethlehem, where she's from. She encourages Ruth and Orpah to go back to their own people to find someone to take care of them. Orpah takes her up. Ruth refuses to leave. And so Ruth comes back with Naomi to Bethlehem. While they're there, one of the things that's available, because they don't have access to the means of life, poor widows, orphans, those without economic means were granted, according to the law, the right to glean in the fields of those who had fields. And so Ruth goes and gleans in the field that we learn later on is Boaz. And Boaz sees her gleaning one day, asks his workers, who she is and what she's doing. Once he finds out that she is, who she is, he essentially says, listen, don't bother her. Let her, glean unbothered. He talks to Ruth and says to her, listen, we bring these jars of water. You don't have to bring your own water. Feel free to dip water from our jars of water. And then one day he makes lunch for her. And this is the day that he's made lunch and they've eaten together and she's gone back to gleaning. We're picking up with verse 17 in chapter 2. I may have missed some details. You're certainly welcome to read it yourself, but it's not about the details. It's about the section we're going to read today. Perhaps something we've learned before will come to light in a new way, but what we're really hoping for is that a word, image, or phrase might speak to us even now, today. So let's listen. Ruth continued to gather in the field until evening. Then she winnowed what she had collected and had enough grain to fill a whole basket. She picked up the basket and carried it into town. When she arrived home, Ruth showed the basket to Naomi, gave her the leftovers from her meal. When she saw this, Naomi asked, "Where did you gather today? Where have you been working? God bless whoever took care of you." Then Ruth told Naomi in whose field she had been working, "The owner of the fields where I worked today is named Boaz." So, if you want, you can stop the recording now. I'm going to give my own reflection of what I heard in the text, what spoke to me. You can just go and get your own reflection if you want, but if you're interested, I will speak of my own reflection. I notice that because of the favor of Boaz, that Ruth is leaving after a day of gleaning with a full basket of food. And not only that there he had fed her so much that she had eaten to her fill and had leftovers from the lunch that he made for her, that she was able to bring her lunch home. So Naomi had dinner. And in the midst of this, the word that arose from me is abundance. Now, both of these women in this story live on the edge of society. They are the marginalized. They don't have access on their own to the means of caring for themselves, of providing for themselves. And yet, because of the law and because of Boaz's favor toward Ruth, Ruth is able to glean an abundance. Now, that abundance reminds me of how we can live our lives. We would think of Naomi and Ruth as very poor, and yet they have enough. In fact, they have an abundance, a whole basket full of grain that is theirs because of Boaz and the law. So abundance is something we think of really wealthy people as having an abundance. There's always a sense that we have a scarce amount, and we do live in a world, heck, the very economic system we live in the United States, capitalism is based on an underlying understanding that the world that resources in the world are scarce. There aren't enough to go around. And so the people who have access to them, have wealth, and those who don't, not so much. And that's how a very oversimplification of how capitalism works. And yet I have met plenty of people who others might not consider to be wealthy, who see themselves as having an abundance. They don't have all the stuff that's advertised everywhere, but they have enough, and they have each other, and they are thankful for the abundance that they have. Ruth and Naomi are very thankful for the abundance that has been provided for them, that through Ruth's hard work and Boaz's favor, we might even say God's favor, through Boaz to Ruth, she is able to provide for both she and Naomi. And in a society where they might have otherwise starved without access to someone they are married to or otherwise, Ruth and Naomi are provided for, and they receive abundantly. In my own life, I'm not always sure that I look at the world with abundance, that I recognize the abundance that comes my way. I'm always in the middle of being caught up in what seems occasionally to be a lack of abundance. We just sent off a huge check to our friends at the Internal Revenue Service because we had underpaid our taxes. Unintentionally, obviously, but now we're paid up. But it made that bank account look much smaller than it had before. And, I was tempted to think of less abundance, scarcity, if you will. And yet I have what I need. I am surrounded by a great abundance of friends, people who love me and whom I love, and there is enough. And enough is, when you think about it, an abundance in and of itself. To have enough when so many do not is an abundance. And if I have nothing else, I have an abundance of love, of grace, of all the things that really matter to me in this world. So I don't know where you might be with abundance, and maybe you heard something else altogether. But I see in this story a bit of the abundance that grace, giftedness provided to Naomi and Ruth through Boaz. I'm I'm interested. If you have any reflections, you certainly are welcome to write them if you are reading this online, or to share this with friends or whatever. But otherwise, I wish you all the best. And I'm delighted you joined me for this sacred reading. I encourage you to try it on your own if you wish. But certainly, I'll be back next Thursday. At least that's my plan. And we'll read some more Ruth. Remember, you are infinitely precious and unconditionally loved for the gift you already are. Until the next time.